Monster Guys present a Yokai podcast presentation, bringing to life, through short stories and informative discussion, the strange, the beautiful, the whimsical, and the mystery of Japanese yokai.
Now please enjoy a story about
The Wonderful Tea Kettle, as retold by Teresa Peirce Williston, narrated by C. Michael McGannon, presented by the Monster Guys.
The old priest was very happy. He had found a new treasure. As he climbed the hill to the temple where he lived, he often stopped to pat his beautiful brass tea kettle. When he reached the temple, he called the 3 boys who were his pupils. "See here," he cried to them. "Just see the beautiful kettle I found in a little shop I passed. I got it very cheap, too." The boys admired it but smiled a little to themselves, for they could not see what he wanted of an old brass kettle. "Now you go on with your studies," said the priest. "I will hear you recite after a while." So the boys went into the next room, and the old priest sat down to admire his prize. He sat and looked at it so long that he grew sleepy, and nod, bob went his head, until in a moment he was fast asleep. The boys in the next room studied very hard for a few minutes, but they were boys, and no one was there to see them, so you can imagine what they were doing by the time the priest was well asleep. Suddenly they heard a noise in the next room. "There, the priest is awake," whispered one. "Oh dear, now we'll have to behave," said the second. The third one was more daring. He crept up and peeped through the screen to see if it really was the priest. He was just in time to see the new tea kettle give a spring into the air, turn a somersault, and come down a furry little badger with a sharp nose, bushy tail, and 4 little feet. How that badger did caper and dance! It danced on the floor. It danced on the table. It danced up the side of a screen. Oh my, cried the boy, tumbling back. "It will dance on me next, oh my." "What are you talking about?" said the other 2. "What will dance on you?" "That goblin will dance on me. I know it will. It danced on the floor, and it danced on the table, and it danced on the screen, and now I know it is coming to dance on me," said the boy. "What do you mean?" said the others. "There is no goblin here." Then they too looked through the screen. There sat the kettle, just as it had been before. "You little silly," cried one of the other boys. "Do you call that a goblin? That looks very much like a tea kettle to my eyes." "Hush," said the third boy. "The priest is waking up. We had better get to work again." The priest woke up and heard the busy lips of his pupils. "What good boys I have," he thought. "Now while they are working, I will just brew myself a cup of tea." He lighted his charcoal fire, filled his kettle with fresh water, and put it over the fire to heat. Suddenly the kettle gave a leap up into the air, spilling the hot water all over the floor. "Hot, hot! I am burning!" it cried, and like a flash it was no longer a kettle, but a furry little badger with a sharp nose, bushy tail, and 4 little feet. "Oh help! Oh help! Here is a goblin!" shrieked the priest. In rushed the 3 boys to see what was the matter. They saw no kettle at all, but in its place was a very angry badger prancing and sputtering about the room. They all took sticks and began to beat the badger, but it was again only a brass kettle that answered clang, clang to every blow. When the priest saw that he could gain nothing by beating the kettle, he began to plan how he might get rid of it. Just then the tinker came by. "That is my chance," thought the priest, so he called, "Tinker, Tinker, come and see what I have for you. Here is an old kettle I found. It is of no use to me, but you could mend it up and sell it." The tinker saw that it was a good kettle, so he bought it and took it home. He pressed it carefully into shape again and mended all the broken places. Once more it was a fine-looking kettle. That night the tinker awoke and found a badger looking at him with his small, bright eyes. "Now see here, Mr. Tinker," said the badger. "I think that you are a kind man, so I have something to tell you. I am really a wonderful tea kettle, and can turn into a badger whenever I wish, as you can see. I can do other things, too, more wonderful than that. The kind-hearted tinker said, "Well, if you are a badger, you must want something to eat. What can I get for you?" "Oh, I like a little sugar now and then," replied the badger. "And I don't like to be set on the fire or beaten with sticks. But I am sure that you will never treat me that way. If you wish to take me round to the different villages, I can sing and dance on the tightrope for you." The tinker did this, and crowds came to see the wonderful kettle. Those who had seen it once came again, and those who had not came to see why the people liked it so well. At last the tinker became rich. Then he put his beloved tea kettle in a little temple on the top of a hill, where it might always rest and have all the sugar plums it wanted.
Michael, we reach back a few years for this story tonight, back to the turn of the century for this retelling in a classic book, Japanese fairy tales, about this little badger. Yeah. And what was the original title?
The original title, and it is translated to many different things, but the original is Bunbuku Chagama, which could mean anything from happy teapot to the lucky teapot to clothes-changing teapot.
Seems to fit well with yokai culture, so
yes,
changes quite a bit. And this little guy is often mistaken for the tanuki.
Actually, yeah, in the original story, it is a tanuki, the raccoon dog. And there's more to the story originally. A shop owner finds this person or badger being, or tanuki being harassed, and he saves it. And later on, that thing turns into a teapot. He whispers to the shop owner, "Hey, sell me for a good price and I'll pay you back for your kindness." He sells him to a priest. The priest freaks out, as we saw in this version of the story, and starts to beat the thing. And the tanuki or the badger or whatever variation of it is in that particular story goes back to the shop owner.
Well, if your tea kettle, newly purchased, turned into a dancing badger, would you not try to beat it with a stick?
You know, whenever we write books, we usually stay up way late in the morning, and I don't know, I think we've seen some pretty crazy stuff in those late hours.
That's true. We have.
I might have to have a conversation with it at that point.
I don't think I would try to beat it with a stick, just because if it took the shape of an animal, I would not want to beat an animal, but a shape-shifting tea kettle. That would be something. I don't know. Maybe if it turned back to a tea kettle, I would beat it with a stick then. But they're often mistaken for tanuki. But in our story tonight, we speak of this badger, this Mujina, which is the word used for the yokai version of that badger, of that animal. But an interesting little fella, and one that is just as mischievous as many other yokai, and one that I think, according to Matthew Meyer on his yokai.com, he talks about the Mujina often shape-shifting to the Naparabo, which is a story we just read about last week. Kind of interesting crossovers there with this little fella.
Yeah, in fact, when the story of the Naparabo was brought over to the West, I think it was originally translated Mujina instead of Naparabo as a kind of a typo on the part of the author or the writer at the time.
That's a pretty big typo.
That's
not just the difference between an M and an N. That's a whole word.
Yeah, but I mean, if
that
you
might
have
be a mistranslation versus a typo.
it certainly set the stage for quite some time, and you have a lot of, not confusion at this point in time, but you still have a lot of conceptions that are crossed because of that. But the Mujina is interesting. It's a cute little creature, and I don't think I would call it less vicious than the kitsune or the tanuki. Maybe it's just because we don't have as many stories about the badger that it's not as crazy
it's less
as
popular.
Those two. Yeah, but it is something that is kind of right up along those other two fairy-like animals.
Mm-hmm.
They oftentimes get together as friends and as rivals in those stories. You'll see tanuki and kitsune and Mujina sometimes have their battle of wits in folklore.
How fun would that be to just be randomly strolling down a dark, lonely mountain path one evening at the change of from day to night and see a little scuffle between those three.
Well, that's the thing, is their scuffle is usually turn out to be who can trick the human in the best way. So I don't
So
think
maybe
I
I don't want to be on that path in the midst of their scuffle.
I'd be okay just to
become
hear
the
about
victim.
it. Yeah.
And you told me that often the Mujina were known to transform into priests.
Yeah, whereas Kitsune are known for turning into the seductive young woman, Tanuki are known for turning into like shop vendors and, your more politicians. Mujina are known to turn into priests, and they like to turn into monks. Oftentimes you can tell them because they lose focus and their tail pops out, but they, for some reason or another, like to turn into monks on the mountaintop. So each of those little yokai seem to have their preference for, or their flavor that they like to stick to.
And often the Mujina also are known to take the shape of young boys as well. So there's quite a variance in story and in what they do and what they become, in those stories. So pretty varied and versatile little creature.
It is, and yet we still see, the same stories get mixed up between whether it's a Tanuki or a Mujina. So.
Well, and, similar size, and both of them very powerful in terms of their magic and their ability. Very cool little creatures, in my opinion.
Yeah, and both very furry, so.
Both very furry. And I believe probably similar in color.
Yeah, because you have to remember the raccoon dog is not an actual raccoon, but it does have similar markings. So I guess a badger does have distinct markings, but, in the blink of an eye, it's not too different, to be honest.
I wonder, though, I don't think so, just based on what I've seen and read. There are so many Tanuki statues and shrines throughout Japan. I don't think as much for the Mujina.
You know what? Now that you bring that up, I don't think I've really seen a lot depicted. Again, they're not as popular as the Tanuki or the Kitsune. But it would be interesting to find out.
Every bit is interesting and certainly worth the read and looking into for yokai enthusiasts.
I agree, but again, the Shirime is interesting.
True.
It's not going to be posted all over Japan, though.
That's right.
Or at least I hope not.
I hope not, too. Very good. Anything else you want to share about the Mujina?
I think that covers it for tonight.
Fun little creature. Good little story, reaching back a little bit into some origin fairy tales for this yokai. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Again, we appreciate very much you listening to our yokai podcasts and our Monster Guys podcasts each week. As always, you can find us at monsterguys.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look up the Monster Guys. We'd love to hear from you. Everybody have a wonderful week. Take care.
Good night.